please.
Matthew Lee, Inner City Press. Thanks a lot for the briefing. I wanted to ask you you'd mentioned, you praised the UK and specifically for signing a protocol. So I wanted to ask you, as you know, with the Saudi-led coalition over Yemen, it's politically supported by the UK. The planes are gassed up by the United States. Many of the bombs, the planes, everything is. What would be the responsibility of the states that are supporting, whether politically or through arms sales, the bombing of Sana'a, to protect cultural heritage there? And then separately in the U.S., I saw that you signed on to, but I'd like to ask you about the Dakota Access Pipeline, whether you see the exploitation of natural resources in native or indigenous lands as a trend, and what your mandate can do about it. Thanks.
Thank you very much for these two important questions. So with regard to the first question, let me say a little bit more about the details about my concerns in Yemen. And here I'm referring to the statistics cited in my report. And I note that, these statistics were current as of August when I finalized that report. And the concern that I expressed at that time was that the airstrikes of the military coalition led by Saudi Arabia in Yemen had caused the destruction of over 500 schools, 39 universities and vocational institutes, and over 50 sites of religious, historic, and cultural significance. And I'd like to stress that my communication with the Saudi government on this matter has now been published, along with the reply from the government of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and you can look for more detail in that documentation. Now, none of these sites, except for one, had been identified as military objectives. That is, none of the sites in the statistics I just cited. None of them had been identified as military objectives by the coalition, and no justification of military necessity was even articulated to support their destruction. The position that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia took in its reply to me is that it is in full compliance with its international humanitarian law obligations in this regard. I think if you look at the results, clearly there is good reason to have some very serious questions about the veracity of that claim, and there needs to be, in fact, detailed investigations of each and every one of these incidents of destruction, obviously in conjunction with looking at civilian deaths in Yemen, which is the paramount concern, and of which this is really a subset. Now, let me say that the question that you raised with regard to the responsibility of second states is a very important one. And I do note that there is emerging international law, certainly that states should not supply weapons that are going to be used to commit human rights violations. And clearly in my report, I'm making clear that intentional destruction of cultural heritage is a violation of cultural rights. Now, the investigations will have to show, of course, whether this is intentional, whether this is disproportionate, or whether simply what has happened is the result of indiscriminate attacks. And clearly we need the results of in-depth investigations before we're able to make the case one way or another there. Nevertheless, what is very clear is that the impact on cultural rights has been very grave indeed. And so I think there needs to be a public discussion and public accountability in the countries that have been providing support and advice and assistance to those conducting military activities in Yemen of what the impact has been on cultural heritage and cultural rights. And accountability in that regard is absolutely critical as well. Thank you also for your question with regard to the pipeline in North Dakota, and I was very honored to sign on to the statement by my colleague, the Special Rapporteur on the human rights of indigenous peoples in that regard, calling for indigenous peoples certainly to be fully consulted about any such construction. And in my capacity as Special Rapporteur on Culture, my particular concern about the pipeline, others have expressed environmental concerns and so on, my particular concern had to do with the impact on cultural sites, especially burial sites. And I really express support for those who are peacefully protesting to express their concern about the protection of those sites, because quite frankly, that's the only way very often that cultural heritage gets protected, because people stand up for it. So I think that issue of consultation is absolutely critical going forward, and I'm very pleased that at my side event later today at 5:30 in conference room 12, One of the experts will be Professor Kristen Carpenter, who is the Oneida Indian Nation visiting professor of law at the Harvard Law School and is only just returned herself from North Dakota, carrying out investigation into what is going on there. Because absolutely, I agree with the spirit of your question. The destruction of indigenous cultural heritage, including in North America, has to be on this agenda of addressing the issue of intentional destruction of cultural heritage. And I heard this time and again from representatives of indigenous peoples, and in particular when I attended the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, that when their cultural heritage is destroyed, the world is silent. And that absolutely has to change.
Do we have any more questions, please? Yes, Mr. Degas.
I wanted to defer it, but I wanted to ask you just, I guess, one follow-up. As a UN Special Rapporteur, do you think the decision by the Secretary General to remove the Saudi-led coalition from the Children in Armed Conflict Annex, which he made, he said in response to financial threats, do you think this emboldens the coalition does it make them act better? And what do you think of it as some people say it means that these lists of shame are now not as credible because you can buy your way off them. What do you think of it as an expert in the field?
That is, of course, a very important question, and I regret that it's largely beyond my mandate. But I would say this, for the aspect that is within my mandate, the aspect of the broader issue in terms of cultural heritage destruction, accountability for all, no matter how powerful, no matter how popular or unpopular, is essential. But unfortunately, on the broader thrust of your question, I'm not able to comment. Thank you.